Your microphone is not on. Your microphone is not on.
It's a very awkward moment. Oh, there you go. That was very awkward. Anyway, right, let me take a step back. Hello, everyone. Good. I'm joking. I'm joking. I'm not going to do that again. Right. So what is this talk? This talk is a little bit about JetBrains from the inside in terms of how we work. What I want to try and do is share somewhat the way that we work and kind of give you some insight into things that we try and do, what works, what doesn't, what is harder, what is easier, and, you know, share a little bit the experiences. I always say that this talk that I give is a lot about JetBrains, of how we work. It's also obviously my team and some of the other teams that work this way. So, you know, there may be teams that do specific things that might be a little bit different to here, but I speak of own experience. So Alexei, as he mentioned, you know, we were founded in the Czech Republic by 3 friends, and initially the main reason that they actually founded this company was because they were writing code in Java and they were having a lot of issues renaming things, right? So they said, why don't we create a plugin that allows us to rename things, and they called it Renamer, which then became IntelliJ IDEA, and from there on, all of the other products. But that essence of we created something because we needed to solve our own problem kind of thing has stayed among the company all of these years. It's always about we create something out of need. So we've grown, you know, substantially now. We're about 1,000 people. And again, as Alexei mentioned, we've got offices in many locations. There's a whole bunch of us also that work remotely. I, for example, work remotely. We're about 16 people now on the developer advocacy team, and the majority of us actually work remotely. And that is not to say that we work at home, because we're probably never home. So we work remotely, but somewhere in the world. We also don't have a traditional hierarchy. While, you know, it's a very low in terms of hierarchy, which is kind of interesting when you are a company of 1,000 people. But we've tried to keep that low. But more than the hierarchy aspect of it, I think that what really stands out at JetBrains is that really titles aren't that meaningful. So it's not a matter of whether you're the CEO, you're not the CEO, you're VP of something or you're not. It really doesn't matter. You're not defined or constrained to the role or what you can and cannot say. Anybody basically can have an opinion on anything. And you don't have to go through managers or anything like that to share your opinion. And that's always been kind of like the essence of it, and it's remained like that. Which is, you know, there definitely isn't really any bad sides that I could think of. In terms of organization, we have a whole bunch of teams. So each team, essentially each product, is its own team. So, you know, they have the developers, they have the QA, they have the product marketing, they have support, and then we have a bunch of other teams. We won't call them resources. We are people, after all, which is like the developer advocacy team and the web team, etc., that are kind of shared amongst all of the other ones. Now, in terms of rules and regulations, what rules and regulations do we have? Well, in essence, it's work whenever you want, work on what you want, and get stuff done. And if you put it like that, it feels like paradise, right? It's like work on whatever you want, whenever you want, and get stuff done. Paradise, right? It's cool. I don't have any hours to go in, I can do what I want, and as long as I get stuff done, it's great. Well, if that was it, then the presentation would be over, right? It's not, because there are some issues with this kind of approach to how you manage a company or manage teams, etc. Some things work, some are a little bit harder to cope with. And what I'll do in this talk then is kind of take you through some of these different aspects and share our experiences of what things have worked, where we found some challenges, and see if maybe you can adopt some of these, or you maybe are working exactly the same way. But I'll start with something very, very easy, which is basically breaking down the hours, right? This idea that, you know, we are programmed to work from 9 to 5, and these are the set hours that everyone is productive within those 9 to 5 hours. Except I'm from Spain. So in Spain, we kind of work from 10 to 10. And we come in at 10 and we go for breakfast and come back around 11:30. Then, it's lunchtime. But generally, we're good. So that's why we work many hours. In fact, there was a survey that showed that Spain is the country, I believe, the first or second country in Europe that works the longest hours and is the least efficient. Okay? So there you go in terms of hours. But regarding, when you work whenever you want, you can come and go whenever you want, that basically applies at JetBrains. So initially, when the largest office were in St. Petersburg, people would basically come to work at around 11:30, 12. Literally, when I started at JetBrains, I'm like, it's 1 o'clock and people are just starting to show up at work. And I was remote, but no one was ever online. That changed. That changed radically when they started to serve breakfast at the office. Now everyone comes in around 9:30, 10. In other countries, it's a little bit different, right? They come in a little bit earlier. But the rules of engagement is essentially for you to be there for the meetings. That's it. And if you work in the Munich office, which is located in Bavaria, you're actually not allowed to go to the office on Sundays. It's locked. And if you go, the manager of the office is going to be fined, right? It's a penal offense to allow people to go to the office. Well, but that is Germany, and Germany is known for many things: sausages, beer, and rules. So what are the benefits of this? In general, there is no problem with this. There's a lot of benefits. Your kid is sick, no problem. You don't have to say, I'm not coming to work because my kid is sick. You have to go to do some paperwork. And again, if you're in Germany, that's a common thing. You have to do a lot. There's no problem. You don't have to tell anyone, really, that you're not coming to work because you've got some private things to do. And you can't work today for whatever the reason. It may be that you don't feel productive. It may be that you got up and you just, decided that, I don't know, whatever reason, you just don't feel productive today. Don't work today. Work on the weekend. Work whenever. Make up for it. At the end of the day, the objective is to get stuff done. Does it work? Generally, it does. As long as you're kind of there for the meetings and stuff, it generally works. There are some aspects of people might say, but, what about support? Support, that needs to be on certain times so that our customers can get good attention, et cetera, et cetera. We've actually never had a problem with that, and our company has won actually some prizes for one of the best supports. That is also that Sergey Baranov, who's been at the company for like 15 of the 18 years, he's got really strange hours. Like he wakes up at 1 in the morning until like 10 in the morning. But generally it works. And as long as you're there for the meetings, it kind of works. Now, in terms of meetings, what about meetings? How do we cope with meetings? So how many of you here, everybody knows what a meeting is, right? I'm guessing. How many of you like meetings? I should take my phone out and take a picture of this. Okay, how many of you like meetings? Nobody, right? And obviously, we all hate meetings, and we've all heard things like, blog posts that says 10 ways to kill your productivity, or 9 ways to suck the soul out of your life by having meetings. Generally, we do not like meetings, and we often hear that bad meetings suck, but what really sucks is bad meetings. And there's some practices that we've tried to adopt to try and improve this situation. There are people that on their curriculum, their CV is, what is your job? I'm a professional meter. Like, I feel productive if I do 10 meetings a day. That is the productivity of my work. But for many of us that don't really enjoy meetings, we've adopted some things that kind of help. So the first and foremost, obviously, is to understand why exactly we're trying to meet. And that normally is broken down into one of 2 aspects. One is coordination, the other one is status update. So coordination is when we want to actually try and coordinate around a specific project. We want to do a specific thing, we want to have a few people to work with each other. Generally, one rule that we do there is that we have a single topic, and we break a very large topic down into very single topics and focus on that single topic. And the second and most important thing, I believe, in a meeting is to have action items. So if you walk away from a meeting with no action items, in my views, and in that of many, I believe, it is a useless meeting. because you've really met for an hour and chatted about a whole bunch of things, and then at the end of it, you're like, well, we didn't really jump to a conclusion, and there's nothing to do from the result of this meeting. And this often is a good question to also ask before you set up a meeting. Are there going to be any action items from it? If they're not, maybe you can actually completely and utterly avoid having a meeting whatsoever. The other type of meeting, of course, is status updates. Now, we're all familiar with the concept of status updates. How many of you here do stand-ups? Okay, many of us do stand-ups. I mean, you know, we used to write software. Are you all developers here mostly? My questions are very simple. They're either yes or no. Yes means put up your hands. No means don't put up your hands. Very simple. Okay, so back in the old days, we used to develop software. You remember those days? And then they came and they said Agile. And then they said Scrum. And then they said stand-ups. And then we all started to do stand-ups. And then we would go to these stand-ups, or at least I would, and essentially just phase out until it was my turn to speak. Just like stand there. And then people would start to sit down because it was taking too long. What did we do? We fixed that by being very, very creative. So I don't know if you've seen, there's a picture of people doing stand-ups by actually doing sit-ups, right? So they do press-ups so that they don't last long. At which point you start to ask yourself, who is forcing us to have this meeting? At which point you start to ask yourself, what is the purpose of our actual stand-up? I mean, what is it about? What do we do these stand-ups for? Is it about sharing updates? Oh, what did you work on today? Oh, I worked on this. Great, good for you, right? Why do I care what you worked on? Is it because of trust? Is it because I don't trust that you have done some work today? So I go in front of my peers and I say to them, I worked on a really, really scary bug. Okay, there, you were productive. Is that the reason? Is it because we don't trust our peers? No. Is it about maybe giving information so that I say, because this is the typical example that they explained to me when they were teaching me Scrum. No, you go to your stand-up and someone says, I was trying to resolve this problem. And someone says, oh, I know about that problem. Let me help you. Now, I'm sorry, but if you need a stand-up to do that, you might want to talk to your colleagues a little bit more than 5 minutes a day. Some people say, no, stand-ups are about trying to improve communication across the team, right? It's your opportunity to communicate with your colleagues. Really? During 10 minutes a day that you're basically remaining silent and all you do is just say, I worked on this? That is not communication. So we actually, on my team and a few others, we've moved away from the idea of stand-ups. Many of them have it, and don't get me wrong, there are a lot of people, a lot of teams inside JetBrains that have stand-ups. But we, for example, have moved away, and we've replaced it with alternatives. We've used tracking tools. So we, for example, log stand-ups. We have a tool that basically integrates with Slack, that integrates with Confluence, and every day we log the stuff that we do, and we share this on a page with Confluence, where the entire company has access. And the main benefit that we have received from that is just for us to, at least on our team on developer advocacy, is to share awareness about things. But those awarenesses don't need to be shared every single day during 15 minutes. So we've moved away from this. And we are actually a very good team that communicates a lot. But communication is also a major issue. And as your company grows, the communication problem becomes harder and harder. Because there's a few challenges that you have with growth and communication. First and foremost is you don't know who's who anymore. Like literally, you know, if you go from a company of 100 people to a company of 1,000 people, you no longer know who's who. Essentially, not only you don't know who's who, you don't even know what you have at your disposition at that company. You don't know if you have a specific person that could help you with something or whatever, or who exactly does what. So this is actually a problem that we still have challenges with. But we found some ways to try and improve this communication. And one of the things that we all try and do is minimize emails. Now, again, emails is one of those things that we all love to hate, right? We all hate emails. So we've tried to minimize emails. One of the things that we do at JetBrains is that we have an issue tracker, right? It's a tool that we sell that's called UTrack, but this is applicable to everything. And we use this for absolutely anything that you can think of. We use it for logging features. We use it for logging bugs of projects. We use it for payment of invoices. We use it for travel coordination. We use it for trips. We use it for marketing. We use it for shows that we exhibit at, absolutely everything. And the benefit of it is that we create a topic for each thing that we need to do. And then we add comments to this discussion and thing that goes on. And the benefit of that is that anyone that needs to be involved, obviously there are privacy levels, etc., can always join a comment or leave a comment. And they can see the entire history. And it's way more beneficial than email, because an email, sometimes you're like, oh, I need to include this person on it. And then you do a reply all, add that person, and they've missed half the thread beforehand. Or you forget to hit reply all, and they've missed a whole bunch of things. So if you have an issue tracker, I don't know if you do, but I would highly recommend starting to use it for many things, not just tracking software bugs. And this has really worked well for us. It's kind of like forums. You have a tree view. The difference is that we can actually close and open issues. So when a discussion is resolved, it's closed, it's done. When a task is resolved, it's closed and it's done. And it stays there forever. Now, one of the other things that we adopted at JetBrains to minimize email, which I'm sure that many of you have heard of, is Slack. Yes? How many of you use Slack? Okay. Now, Slack came with a promise. Actually, they came with two. They said, one, get rid of email. Yes, replace it with 25,000 notifications every minute. Two, search everything. Now, I don't know about you, but it's the last thing I ever want to search for things is on Slack, because I never managed to find anything. And I used to be a great proponent of Slack. Like when Slack started to come out, I would go to everyone and say, you got to join Slack. It's awesome. It's so cool. And I was remote, so it was even more. Like, I get to talk to anyone at any moment in time. And Slack has many, many benefits. But I've realized that it also has many disadvantages, because it has created this environment in which you are expected to be available at any instant in time to attend any issue, right? And if you don't respond, people are like, oh, I sent a message and it's been 30 minutes. It shows that they're online. Why are they ignoring me? Like, what's happened? Did I say something wrong? It creates this anxiety in you. And it creates anxiety in the person that's receiving that message, in that, oh, there's this bloody thing flashing all the time. So personally, and a few people that I know, we have started to adopt a different mechanism here, in which unless I need something really, really urgently from you, I will not ever ping you on Slack. I will go back to the old ways that we had, whether it's a UTrack, whether it's email. And only when it involves a group or a discussion of multiple people for a specific thing would we start to use Slack. Now, I've started to adopt this, a few others have, but generally it's not always like this at JetBrains. So this is a ways of us pushing information, but there's also the aspect of pulling information, right? Which is, there is a balance of, as the company grows and as there's so many things to be aware of, you need to store all of this somewhere. Now, we have a black hole at JetBrains where we store information. It's also known as Confluence. You might have heard of it. Anytime we need to document some process, we say, write it in Confluence. Someone goes, writes it, and guess what? No one ever remembers it's there. It's fantastic. It's just this amazing database of information that we'll never even know. To the extent that there have been times that we have redone the same thing because we didn't know that it's on Confluence. And when I say Confluence, I say any kind of Wikipedia that allows you to, store information. So we haven't actually managed to solve that problem that well. If anyone has, let me know how. Now, having said that, Confluence is kind of helpful, But the problem is that now what's happening is that I can push information to you and you'll get that information. Versus what about pull? How do I know that you will receive certain information that you know that you need but don't know it exists? And this is one of the issues that we have with Confluence. And what we've actually recently done now is we've created a new channel on Slack, which is called Who. And the main purpose of that channel, Who, is that you go and ask, who can help me with this or that? Or how do I do this process? And other people at the company will chime in and say, this person or that person, or go to this link and do it. But there are some things that we still push. One of them is the internal newsletter, which essentially started out with, I work on the developer advocacy team, so I used to share information about what's going on in the community for the developers. That grew in sharing more information. It grew into sharing non-technical articles. It grew into information sharing about company sales and how we're doing and which products are growing, which products are not growing. All of this information. And this goes out once a month. And it includes information about what's happening at the company that is relevant to everyone and what different teams may or may not be working on. This is the only thing basically that we push. Everything else is pull-based only. We have, like many companies that I'm sure you have, internal conferences. Now at JetBrains, we're about 500-600 developers, right? So we thought we'll put on a conference and we'll do it all about technical stuff. And the feedback we got was, we want non-technical content. And we started to do like 50-50 and then 60-40. And then now it's kind of like 80-20 in non-technical content. Because people want to get information about other things that are happening at the company, not specifically about technical talks. So we said, okay, we'll do that. And then we invented Technical Wednesdays. And we said, okay, we'll give Technical Wednesdays where you can go and do technical talks or any kind of talk, whether you're in marketing, you're in sales, or whatever, about what you're doing at the company. And unfortunately, I don't know why, but we only got people talking about technical things until someone said, well, you're calling it Technical Wednesdays. So we got rid of the technical part. And now we get a little bit more of people from different areas coming. And this is very useful, right? Because it enables people from different parts of the company to understand what other people are doing. Yes? Most of us are developers. So when someone says, you know, I mean, there are people that join JetBrains and they say, so what does a developer advocate do? Because what we think they do is basically go to conferences and get drunk. And I kid you not, this is what they actually think we do. There might be some truth to it, but that's beside the point, okay? Or what do salespeople do? Oh, they cold call and they use sell. No, they actually don't. And it's very important to understand what other people at the company do to get a better idea of how everything is working together. Now, Alexei spoke about management briefly, and I talked about, you know, how we have or we don't have many layers of management. And you've all seen this, right? This is like, you know, chief idea killer, VP of no, because that's essentially what happens when you start to have management. You have people that are, what they want to do is, in a way, control. Have you ever heard the expression of, you know, someone climbs the corporate ladder until they reach their level of incompetence and no higher? Because they can control everything that they're competent about, and they need to make sure that nobody knows they're incompetent. And that is about the control. Fortunately, we really don't have this at JetBrains at all. So what does the management look like, or should I say no management? Well, there's no micromanagement, for sure. And this, believe me, is a problem. I've had people join the team that say, okay, I'm here, what should I do? And you're like, well, I'm not going to tell you what to do. There's no list of tasks I have to do. No, go figure it out yourself. And they've not felt comfortable, and they've left. Because there are some people that need a list of tasks, and that's perfectly fine. For some people it works, for some people it doesn't. So I emphasize that I do not micromanage. I will not take a look and say, these are the list of things that you need to work on. I will not do that. And nobody generally does that at JetBrains. Given there's no micromanagement, there's no micro-reporting either. It's not about, oh, well, what did you do this week? Tell me what you did to raise awareness about what you're doing so that I know that the left hand may need to talk to the right hand, because sometimes we end up in situations where we're doing similar things and we don't know about it. But beyond that, we're not counting how many bugs you fixed that week, because it would be stupid, right? Sometimes we know a bug can take 2 weeks to fix, and another time it takes 5 minutes. The other thing is that there's no permission required, which means that if you want to do something, you can just do it. You don't have to go and ask permission from someone. It's good often to raise awareness and say, hey, I'm about to embark on this journey. And you say, well, great, good for you. Or talk to this person that knows a little bit about this. But you don't have to ask for permission. And this also applies across teams. So if I'm, for instance, in a developer, I can go and say, you know what, I would like to get into marketing, or I have this idea and I want to do some marketing around this idea. It's absolutely fine. You have a 20% project at JetBrains that you can cross boundaries. In fact, that's one of the ways that people move around. We have had developers move into HR. We've had marketing move into development. We've had sales move into something else, right? You're not limited in terms of where you can apply your skills. So while in many companies, people think of it as, how do I grow in a company? Well, I grow up the corporate ladder. In JetBrains, you're going to do 2 steps and fall down, because there is no corporate ladder. And the growth is more around how I grow as a person and the knowledge that I can acquire and the experiences that I can acquire and challenge myself. But this means that there's no permission required, and you can essentially do things. And as the saying says, it's much better to work with someone that asks for forgiveness than someone that never does anything because they're too worried. So then if we don't have a micromanagement, how do we work? Well, we've generally set objectives. So to give you an example of my case, developer advocacy, right? We set a series of goals. What is our goal in developer advocacy? To try and make people work more efficiently with what they're doing, to try and make people be better at what they're doing through the use of our tools, through whatever. These are our goals. We provide guidance for these goals, and generally my job, or those that are helping others, is remove obstacles for them, right? And we don't have KPIs. There is no KPIs, really. Essentially, we do not have KPIs. Now, that is good, but it's also bad, right? Because KPIs tell you exactly what you need to accomplish to reach those KPIs. So you can actually kind of like say, okay, well, you know what? These are my tasks. I've reached this KPI. If I'm in sales, I made 250 million this quarter. Okay? Therefore, that means that my work has been good. When you don't have KPIs, how do you measure your work? That becomes a major problem. And especially in work that you do not know the actual impact it may or may not have. Take developer advocacy. Take marketing. It's very difficult to measure the kind of impact that your work is having, unless you're focusing on stupid KPIs like how many Twitter followers did I gain this quarter. This is ridiculous, and yet, unfortunately, there are many companies that enforce this. And of course, we all know what happens when you enforce KPIs, yes? We find ways to game the system. We cheat and we lie and we target the KPIs instead of trying to concentrate on things that we have to do. So when you give all of this and you give a lot of freedom, it sounds great. But no, because freedom also comes at a cost. Because if someone joins and I say, here, you joined, you're an IntelliJ IDEA developer advocate. There you go. They're like, what do I do? Make people better at using IntelliJ IDEA, make people better at programming. How do I do it? I don't know. You figure it out. Okay. Okay, let me think about the list of tasks I could work on. Which one should I start with? I don't know. You figure it out. It is that level, and that level is often a struggle. So what you need is self-organization, which isn't easy, and it's challenging. And every day I still challenge. I mean, I've been at this job for 8 years, and I still challenge. I still find it challenging. You need discipline, right? Because when I start something, I need to finish it. And often, something more shiny comes, and like, ooh, no, stop it, Hadi, finish what you're doing. No, but it's really, look at it, it's like shining and nice. No, don't look at the new shiny. Focus on what you're doing. And try and be responsible. Because this is not only responsibility to yourself, but towards others as well. So I'll give you a case study. And this isn't even about me, this is about developers. Okay? Right now, you said, work on whatever you want, do whatever you want, just get stuff done. Okay, I'm going to work on something fun. Someone requested a new feature in our issue tracker. It is amazing. This actually looks like fun. Let me work on it. Right now, let me ask a few questions. Does it add value? Yes, because someone asked for the feature. It's an awesome feature, and I'm going to work on it, and therefore my users are going to use it, and it's awesome. Do I enjoy it? Yes. Win-win, right? It's awesome. But what about in the larger context? Does it add value? You know, what do I put aside for me to focus on this feature? Am I impacting myself? Am I impacting my team? Am I impacting the long term of the company by not focusing on certain things that I should be focusing on? Am I delaying other things by focusing on these things? And we all go through this, even now, right? Oh, I'm starting a new project with AngularJS. Yes, I'm doing that project a month in. Oh, what's this? Vue.js. Ooh, new framework, shiny. Let me go and start on Vue.js. We all struggle with this in different ways. So what's needed? You need to know how to prioritize things. You need to understand, not in the smaller context also, but in the larger context, how to prioritize the work that you're doing. And you need to know how to say no. Because often it's very difficult to just say, oh yeah, I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it. And more importantly, you know how to control your passions. Yes, even us, when we hire developers, we say in the job offering, we want passionate developers. Yes, everyone wants passionate developers. We want people passionate about marketing. We all want people that are passionate, because people that are passionate really enjoy what they're doing. The problem is that passion also comes at a cost. Passion impacts your ability to say no. Passion impacts your ability to deprioritize some things that you would really be passionate about. And it's very important to learn to control your passions, because if you do not do that, you can end up hurting things. So it's not just about having a lot of passion, it's about knowing when too much passion is too much. And questioning if what you're doing adds value, because this is really important. And we don't do this often enough. And especially we do not do it if we don't have KPIs to measure by, or we don't have sales targets, or we don't have X or Y. It becomes very difficult. And how do you know if it adds value? How do you know? Yeah? I'm here giving this talk. I'm getting paid by JetBrains to give this talk. How do I know if it adds value or not? I have no idea, right? It's not easy to deal with these things. But this is something that, you know, a lot of us struggle with anywhere, outside of JetBrains. But all of this freedom also comes when there's trust. If I say to someone, I'm giving you freedom, but I don't trust you, then there is no freedom. It's not just a word of saying, oh, I trust you. Trust is something that is very hard to gain and very easy to lose, right? Yes? It's very easy to be out of that circle of trust that happens. So you say, well, if there's no management, is there leadership? Well, of course there is leadership, because why not? Leadership is such a beautiful term, isn't it? Leadership, everyone wants to be a leader. Everyone needs to have leadership because it sounds so great. I'm a good leader, right? Well, what exactly does that mean, right? You don't go around saying, I manage people, because you sound horrible. You go and say, I lead people. What exactly does leadership mean? I don't know. What does leadership mean to you? Some of the things that I've found that have helped me enable other people, whether you want to call it leadership or not, is, first of all, to not be a bottleneck, right? To not be a person that has to say yes or no or approve or not approve anything that is happening on the team. To not be a person that has to be aware of anything that anyone is doing on the team. Learning to delegate. And learning to delegate is very easy. You say, hey, you do this job. Why should I do it? Why don't you do it? That's not hard. Everybody can do that. It's now after you delegate and you start to be very critical about the job you've delegated. You know the saying, if you want to do something right, do it yourself? My mother always said that. Yes, and when we look at the job that someone else has done that we could have done, we're often a little bit more critical about it. And we're like, oh, well, I could have done a much better job. And it's learning to differentiate yourself and not be critical in these ways. It's about providing guidance. Now, providing guidance is great. Hey, do you need guidance? Sure, come to me. But then it becomes a pull. How many times do we go and say, hey, actually, let me give you some guidance? We sometimes forget about that as well. And being candid, because if you do not give honest feedback to people, if you do not say what you're doing is not right, you need to improve in this and this and this, then you're not only lying to yourself, you're not only lying to your team and your company, more importantly, you're lying to that person. And in the long run, you're going to hurt that person because they're going to feel that, hey, they're doing a great job. And then next day they know they're fired and you're like, but why? I was doing a great job. Or even if they're not fired, they leave to another company and there they might fall flat on their feet because they never received candid feedback. And it's about knowing how to listen and be heard. Right? And there's a difference between listening and hearing. And we have this problem, all of us, right? We are having a conversation with someone, whether it's our partner, whether it's our spouse, whether it's a team member, and we're having a heated debate. And what are we doing exactly? When we're hearing them talk, we're just waiting for them to shut up so that we can tell them they're wrong, so that we can give them our opinion strongly about it, as opposed to actually opening our heads and listening to them and seeing whether we don't see a perspective that we should. But most of all, it's about trusting and caring. And, oh, these are beautiful words, yes? I trust you, I care for you. And I often find care very difficult, right? How do you care for a person? You have a team of people and you say, hey, you know what? I don't care about you. You're not going to say that. Of course, you're going to say, no, I really care for you. But what is care? How can you care for someone if you don't know them personally? How can you care for someone if you don't spend time with them? How can you care for someone if you don't know their issues? And this is not easy. You need to establish a friendship with people. People often say that, no, business and pleasure should be separate. We shouldn't mix friendship with business because then it gets personal. Absolutely it gets personal. Because if it doesn't get personal, you're treating them as a resource. You're treating them as a replaceable thing. If you truly want to care for someone, if you use these big words of caring, you need for it to get personal. You need for it to have a relationship with the people that you work with. Now, I'm not saying that you need to go and make friends with every single person in a company, but those that you work close with, you need to create a bond. You need to create a strong relationship. Because otherwise, you won't really care. You don't want to, then don't say you care. But this also comes in a two-way street. Because if I trust you and I care for you, I expect the same. And when you break my trust, or you don't care for me, or for the work you're doing, or for the company, then you lose my care and you lose my trust. And often, this can happen as well. Now, when you have a company and it grows from 1 to 1,000 or from 3 people to 1,000, and we're very fortunate at JetBrains in that we have very, very low turnover. So the first employee at JetBrains is still at JetBrains. Right? So that means something as well because it means that we are doing something that's right. But this culture is kind of difficult. And as the company grows, people are like, oh, they're going to change the culture. Oh, we need to keep this culture. So how do you kind of keep this culture? Well, culture is infused. You lead by example. Right? You want someone to do something, you show them, you set an example, just like we do with our children. Although I set an example of being a developer, as I am, and I have 3 kids, and I say to them, do you want to be a developer? And their response is no. And I say, why? And they say, because we don't want to grow up and be like you. Honestly. So there I a little bit messed up on leading an example. It's also about understanding different cultures and different people. Now, I'm sure you're all familiar with this, what the British, anyone from England here? Right, this is very, very true, okay? What the British say, what the British mean, and what the rest of the people understand. If I say very interesting, a British person actually says, I don't agree, yes? Everyone else thinks that they are impressed. And this is an example with the British, but it's very common. I grew up in England, so I know that this is true. And in fact, just recently, I was having a meeting with a colleague of mine, Sasha, and it was a very nice, long discussion, and he ends it, and he says to me, well, Hadi, that was very interesting. And I said, what do you mean? Do you mean it in a Russian way, or do you mean it in a British way? Right? And it's about learning to cope with different cultures. It's about, you're all familiar with the Hanlon's razor, which is, never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity. Never attribute to malice that what is adequately explained by ignorance. About me not knowing, about me not understanding the culture. And this is really, really important, right? Because often, for example, when you give feedback and how you give feedback also is important, right? So, I work, a lot of people at JetBrains are Russian, in certain cultures, whether it's Russian or whether it's American, whether it's English, we give feedback in different way. In the US, they sugarcoat everything, right? In England, we somewhat sugarcoat, or we just say, that's an interesting option, right? When we say you're crazy, okay? Now, in other places, they're like, this is really stupid, yes? Why are you doing this? This is stupid. And it's important sometimes that we all know we're sugarcoating things, but that sugarcoating is often important. And it's important and necessary to think about these things at times. Culture is not moaning up the corporate ladder, essentially because there isn't one. It's just like, oops, I fell. Now what do I do, right? You generally don't go and complain to your manager that you're not happy with someone. You try and fix the problem. You generally don't go and say, oh, this is an issue. You fix the problem. You help towards fixing the problem. And yes, you know what? They say, yes, it may be. I don't know, maybe in a company of 20,000 people, probably it's much, much harder to do, but you're not going to fix global scale problems at that level often. But what we found is that despite 1,000 people, we can still fix things that are even out of our scope. We can still address things without having to go through layers or deal with corporate ladders. Emphasize on feedback, give it and receive it. And again, this is where we often lack, right? Is that we are very, very fast to give negative feedback. Now, negative doesn't happen to be, mean, horrible feedback. It can be constructive. But we're not so fast in giving positive feedback. We're not so fast in saying, actually, look, you did a really good job here. We're very quick to say, oh, I spent 6 months developing this feature, you use it and you're like, yeah, but this is crap, it shouldn't work like that. Nobody says, oh, no, that's actually really, really good. However, maybe you could improve on this. And this is important. Now, I'm not saying become false and say everything that someone does, pat them on the back. But there needs to be a balance. And often, we lack it as well. We should be more proactive in giving positive feedback. And essentially be the change. Don't stick back and expect things to happen. If you want to try and change something, contribute towards changing that thing. So you need to essentially protect the culture, but we also need to be open to change. Because if you do not, then what happens is that you start to become the Borg. And you start to close your mind and say, well, I'm not going to think about doing something differently because we've always done it like this. And that can be a problem because I've actually seen new people join and do things exactly the same as other people have done. Why? Well, because they've always done it like this, right? And you say, oh, yes, they fit into the culture. Sure, but maybe they should think about doing things in a different way. And that's also very important to do. So, but if I were to summarize, to kind of characterize what the two things that really I feel that contribute to the way that we do things at JetBrains is essentially to trust people, give them freedom to do what they want, and care for them. And really, generally, if you give these two things, then we all try and do our best in our daily work and our daily life. Thank you.